The Italian section of the Hermitage includes works from 7 centuries. In its beginning, there are works from the late 13th, early 14th centuries, which foreshadow the Renaissance. The development of Gothic art in Northern Europe and new processes in the social and cultural life of Italy were parallel trends to a considerable degree. The Italians began sooner than other nations to work out a secular world outlook. Man began to comprehend his particular position in the surrounding world, as well as his personal individuality. Humanism, as a new system of secular world outlook, formulated the concept of man as the crown of the act of creation and affirmed belief in man's infinite potentialities. Not heavenly, but not just earthly, became an image of man in the works of art of the Italian Renaissance. It was an ideal, evolved image, and the source of such inspiration was found in the art of the ancients, while omitting the canons of the Middle Ages. The art of the Italian Renaissance was nevertheless not merely an imitation of that of antiquity. It was endowed with spiritual values, which represented an organic part of the new individual consciousness, thanks to the spiritual experience of the Middle Ages. Ideal forms were now imbued with living human emotions and mobile spirituality. The principles of linear perspective became an active instrument in the new artistic investigation of the surrounding world. The schematic approach to world phenomena yielded to times when the representative conception became dominant in art.
The crucifixion scheme and the figurative forms themselves followed in the 13th century the canons of Byzantine art. The Italian painter nevertheless left his signature on the panel. The Hermitage piece is thus the only actually identified work of this master.
The best incarnation of Gothic traditions in Italian painting is represented by the work of Simone Martini, as well as the Sienese school of painting as a whole. The pictures dedicated to the image of the Madonna are the best in the work of Simone Martini. One of the masterpieces on this subject, Madonna from Annunciation scene, a panel from a diptych, is in the Hermitage. The other panel, with the Archangel Gabriel, is in the National Gallery in Washington. Mary's image, created by Simone Martini, is still imbued with a purely medieval, subtle beauty. The volume is barely indicated, and the proportions are quite unnatural. The major artistic tasks here were the exquisite color palette and the lithe and beautiful outline. These qualities endowed the Madonna's image with charming femininity.
The elegant carved frame can be considered a masterpiece of the late Gothic style. The golden background of the painting is also executed in the Gothic tradition, but the figures of the holy personages are imbued with great actuality and plasticity, which displays the viability of Giotto's tradition in Italian art. The figure of Mary, which stands out graciously against the golden background, is framed by the stamped tracery border, which recalls manuscript illumination in the Gothic style. But Simone's painting is penetrated with a more punctuated and deep lyricism, unusual in medieval art. It is no accident that Simone was a friend of Petrarch and his favorite painter. Compare this image of the young Virgin with that in the painting by Lorenzo Giurini. They are divided by only 25 years, and many Gothic features survived, such as the form of the frame and the absence of a developed feeling for space. The mood of the imagery is both festive and serene, and the face of the Virgin with golden hair is filled with a sublime but earthly beauty. Because of his piety, this painter was called Beatus. The tender harmony of his range of colors and his innate ability for poetical contemplation caused the nickname Angelico. Though the figures are of a different scale, characteristic of medieval art, the composition is nevertheless clear and exactly calculated, which distinguished the trend of artistic search of the Renaissance masters.
The term Renaissance appeared in the 15th century to signify the rebirth of classical erudition. In the mid-15th century, it had already established an application for renovated representative arts. Later, the classification of Renaissance art was elaborated, and this early period was called Quattrocento, or the early Renaissance. In the 15th century, too, Florence was ahead of other artistic centers. New great artists appeared here, such as Masaccio in painting, Donatello in sculpture, and Brunelleschi in architecture. All of them can be considered the fathers of the Renaissance, and Florence itself as the New Athens. The rendering of three-dimensional space by means of linear perspective, which was based on the laws of optics and mathematics, became the most important discovery of the masters of the Renaissance. Fra Filippo Lippi used the linear perspective scheme in a small part of his altarpiece, the so-called predella, with the Vision of St. Augustine. It is notable that he even attempted to calculate the sea, which is getting narrow in the distance. He investigated the allegorical meaning of the vision with great visual insistence. The Trinity was represented in the form of a disk with three faces. St. Augustine's attempt to obtain an insight into the transcendental mystery of the Trinity is unsuccessful in exactly the same way as an angel tries to pour water from the sea into a small pit. The art of Sandro Botticelli, as well as that of his pupil, Filippino Lippi, flourished in Florence at the court of Lorenzo il Magnifico, the grandson of Cosimo Medici. The court was absorbed by Plato's ideas and the possibility of combining them with that beautiful world of reality, which had just been opened by the art of the Renaissance. The Florentine intellectuals interested in antiquity still couldn't push away the experience of the Middle Ages. The masterpiece from the hand of Filippino Lippi the adoration of the Magi, reflected the subtle taste of the Medici's court, as well as its interest in traditional sacred images. The beauty of the earthly world took on a tender and delicate form, with a soft fluidity of lines and exquisite range of color. The artist had few rivals capable of achieving such spaciousness and transparency in the landscape. The Hermitage painting, St. Jerome, painted by Botticelli, is his last work. It was a side panel of an altarpiece. We can find here nothing of the charming grace of imagery of Botticelli's earlier works, which are in the Uffizi. Sharp outlines and contrasted hues, penetrated with tense expression, appeared in Botticelli's style in the 1490s, under the influence of the aesthetic ideas of the preacher Savonarola. Such painters as Perugino and Pietro di Cosimo were contemporaries of Leonardo da Vinci. The coming high Renaissance style allowed new artistic perspectives to be seen. In the late Quattrocento works, one can discern the freshness of feelings characteristic of early Renaissance art. But there are here the first attempts to generalize the earlier experience. The Florentine painter of the most original talent, Pietro di Cosimo, made the study of the head of an old man, which dates from the same period as the Hermitage paintings by Filippino and Botticelli. This image is very severe, but this expressive quality is quite different from that of Botticelli's works. It bears an impression of melancholy, but without any nervous fanaticism. All secondary details are ejected, and the head looks like a powerful dome. The painter made a portrayed individual stand for a type. Perugino, who was Raphael's teacher, embodied the lyrical trend in the art of Quattrocento. He was born in Umbria, and the nature of Umbria filled his paintings with softness and calmness. Saint Sebastian accepts the execution not so much with Christian patience as with purely angelic ease. His nude body impresses us with its classical beauty. The Christian martyr Sebastian was killed by Roman legionaries under Emperor Diocletian. The painter puts his signature very simply on one of the arrows which went into the neck of the youth.
In the 1490s, new features appeared in the pictorial manner of Botticelli, such as sharp outlines and contrasted hues. They were seemingly connected to the ascetic ideas of the preaching monk Savonarola. The artist made the portrayed individual stand for a type. Everything in this drawing suggests an extremely tangible volume, because all secondary details are rejected, and the head looks like a powerful dome. Venice is confirmed as the setting of this scene by the form of the window and furniture. More than once, the Renaissance masters located scenes taken from Holy Scripture in contemporary interiors of Italian houses. The court of Lorenzo Magnifico distinguished itself by a refined taste that found reflection in this masterpiece of Lippi. The beauty of the earthly world took on a tender and delicate form, with a soft fluidity of lines and exquisite range of color. The painter had few rivals who were capable of achieving such spaciousness and transparency in the landscape. The very expressive profile of Savonarola is an excellent example of the Renaissance Italian tradition of the profile portrait. On the medal's reverse, we can see a punishing sword and a word from the teachings of Savonarola. It is well known that the wars between Rome and Carthage in the 2nd and 3rd centuries BC ended with the victory of the Romans, which is why the allegory of Rome is rendered as a young beautiful girl with emblems of power, a globe and a warder, while the allegory of Carthage is depicted in despair. The Christian martyr Sebastian was killed by Roman legionnaires under the Emperor Diocletian. The artist put his signature very simply on one of the arrows, which went into the neck of the youth. His nude body impresses us with its classical beauty. The close-knit composition reveals a new trend in the Italian art of that time, and the monumental form imparts high significance to this image. The painter's subjects are the male members of the d'Este family, Duke Ercole I d'Este in the center, and his elder son Alfonso to the right. Under this ruler, by the early 16th century, Ferrara became an important center of arts in northern Italy. Isabella d'Este, sister of Alfonso, was not represented here, for by that time she was in Mantua, married to the renowned Italian military leader Francesco Gonzaga. This woman, extremely well educated for her time, was later portrayed by Leonardo da Vinci, who made a sketch for her portrait. The setting of this gospel event is an architectural surround, which is handled as ingenious theater scenery. The dancing angels, rich nature, brilliant splashes of color, all this creates an aura of general joy in connection with Christ's birth. The character of the frame, as well as the plasticity of the figures, reveal the acquaintance of the artist with the art of classical antiquity. The piece is done in low, almost flat relief, but the soft chiaroscuro suggests the feeling of the round modeling. It seems also that a snow-white marble is shining with an emanation not only of the light, but of the emotions too. Such a motif as the diffusing clouds impart pictorial quality to this relief. In the representation of this theme, the artist used an allegorical formula. As a childish-looking angel unsuccessfully tries to pour the water from the sea into a small pit, so St. Augustine's insight into the transcendental mystery of the Trinity is insufficient because of his human nature. Very interesting is the artist's absorption with problems of linear perspective. He even attempted to calculate the sea, which is getting narrow in the distance. The Roman historian Livy, Titus Livius, described a story when Scipio, called Scipio of Africa, not only set free a young captive, having known that she was engaged to be married, but also gave her gifts of gold instead of demanding a ransom. The composition is not presented with unity of action. To the right we can see a girl surrounded by warriors. In the center she is represented once more. The idyllic landscape, brilliant colors, and happy end of the story suit the painting of a marriage chest.